sometimes you need an appraisal on your property. And sometimes you actually want the value to be less, and sometimes you want the value to be more. You're going to want to listen to this show to find out why you might want it to be less, and also how you can make it less or more.
Moving forward with the Decker team. Moving forward together with the Decker team.
We've been discussing appraisals, when you need them, when you don't need them, and what you might need them for. And we're now going to hit cases where you may want the appraisal to come in lower than maybe even market value.
You want to get it as low as you can without torching the place. So, but a lot of people are like, well, why would I want a low appraisal? It doesn't make any sense. Don't you always want the highest, value for your property?
There's only a couple cases where you might want a lower appraisal. One would be, and also let me put a caveat in here. We don't do anything illegal to get the value lower.
Yeah, you don't call the guy and say, hey, I'll give you $50. If we're not talking about blackmail or, bribery. We're talking about legitimate ways in order to reduce the value or keep it low before the appraisal happens.
Right. And so when would you want that appraisal low? One time would be, for instance, probate on a will where there's been a death and the property's gone into the estate. Now that doesn't happen with a spouse. If the spouse if the title's held properly with real estate, the house will automatically roll into the surviving person.
But if, and I've seen this, where the spouse has like 10 properties or 10 pieces of land and it's not in the spouse's name, it's just in the individual's name, then it may not roll over properly.
Right. And so there's things that you can do. I would highly recommend you do some tax planning, some estate planning. It's not always the funnest subject or time to do it, and it can save lots on taxes.
Tons.
At time of death.
Like we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. Easy.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So if it's going into probate, which means you have to evaluate the value of the property before the will and the estate can be settled so that you can actually then sell the property, because we can't sell a property until it's gone through probate. And so that value, sometimes you don't want it too high because then the estate pays too much taxes. Now, one way, sometimes when an estate's going to sell a house, they're going to do things to make it worth more to sell it. So they're going to clean it up, take all the
garbage out,
possessions out. They might repaint. They might, if the person was a smoker, they might clean it. They might change carpet. They might pull the carpet out, refinish the floors. All of that to increase the value of the sale. But you don't want to do any of that prior to the appraisal if you want a lower value on the appraisal.
Because then you'd have to pay more tax on the work that you've done, whereas it's going into the estate at the lower value. So why would you want to pay tax on that,
Exactly.
Especially if you're going to own it. Now, if you're going to sell it after, there may still be tax.
You mean where a family member is going to take it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and also a lot of times that family member may be buying out other people in the estate to take the house on, right?
And then everyone needs to be aware of, that you're putting it at a lower value, or
you're not really putting it at a lower value. I think it's important to know that, hey, the person left it in this condition. We're going to evaluate it at this condition, and the new owner is going to spend the time, effort, and money to upgrade it or modernize it or whatever the case may be.
And sometimes the whole family will come in and declutter the house or get it ready or go through the possessions and see who wants what. And so you don't really want to do that until after the appraisal's happened if it's going to make it
get that appraisal in quick. Now, when would be another time that you may want a low valuation?
So this is one that's a little bit tricky because we talked about it before, divorce. And you may want a lower value so you don't have to pay as much to your spouse. So, that's something that we can't really comment on because both are owners.
Yes. And it's only when somebody wants to buy the other person out that they may want a low value.
Yep.
But I guess, again, the value is based on the condition of the house at the time.
Yep.
So if the person that wants to be bought out, well, they can clean up the house and make it look as nice as possible and cut the grass and trim the weeds and all that kind of stuff and clean the gardens out. Because all of that affects the appraiser's mindset on
Absolutely.
on
Perceived
valuation.
Well, and it not just the appraisal, but it would also affect the buyer's mindset, which is why the appraiser has to take it into consideration.
Right. And then there's another case, and that's where you're changing the use of your property.
Yes.
And you're changing it from a rental property.
Yeah, investment.
To
any investment property.
Right. To a principal residence where you're taking now possession of it. So you wouldn't want to, let's say you've had a rental property, you bought it for $200,000 and it's now worth somewhere between $350 and $450. And you're going to change it from rental, but when you go to change it from rental, you're going to upgrade it for your personal life. You maybe put a new kitchen in, new bathroom, clean up the hardwood, put new hardwood in, or new carpets, or paint the whole place, because now you want to move into it for your principal residence. You would want your appraisal before you do all that work, because it sets up the taxes. Because when you change the use of it from residential rental to personal use, that period that it was a rental, you got to pay the capital gains on the growth. Now, do you have to? I'm not sure. You might have to check with your accountant whether you have to pay that when you change the use of it, or only when you dispose of the property.
I'm pretty sure it's disposal.
It's only at disposal.
But if you're worried, you should call your accountant and have a conversation, especially if you're doing multiple properties like this. However, my understanding would be that it's on disposal with any piece of real estate.
And again, that's why you want the appraisal when you do it, not a forensic appraisal, which costs a lot of money to go backwards.
Yeah. And again, we're not tax accountants, so we're not going to get crazy into this or crazy into the weeds here. But you could technically change it every year if you were going to move in, move out, move somewhere else. You could keep changing it back to your personal residence, which for whatever reason, maybe you're traveling or...
Yeah, I've seen that for diplomats.
Yeah.
Where they have a property here and they got posted for 2 years and then come back, and then they're maybe here for a couple of years, get posted again. And so the house keeps changing between usage.
And so then each time you would technically need an appraisal in order to do that. Now, could you maybe, I don't know, I don't want to get into that, but appraisal is what you should be doing. That's the right way to do it. So you were saying the capital gains, for those years that it's a rental. Then with your personal residence, there's no gain on the growth. But you don't want to keep it as your personal residence when it's rented, because then you wouldn't be able to claim any of the expenses against the rental income. And so you really do want to do that change of use.
And then tax appraisal. Now, that's generally a different appraiser that's doing that.
Yep.
But sometimes there is a dispute. You think your taxes are too high or whatever. And so you ask the appraisal to come in and reappraise. Sometimes they physically come to your property, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just redo the calculations of the current houses based on square footage and that sort of thing. But sometimes they actually come and inspect the property. So if you've done some improvements, like finished your basement or
a new kitchen,
new bathrooms, renovated your bathrooms, changed all your windows, things that you didn't need a building permit for. But the tax appraiser says, hey, actually, because tax appraisal is based on market value, they might say, no, the market value of your property is actually higher than we had it at. So be careful disputing your taxes if you've done upgrades to your home. And shortly, we're going to talk about, right after this break in our next segment, we're going to talk about the difference between a letter of opinion and a full appraisal, and why you might want one over the other.
Moving forward with the Decker team. Moving forward together with the Decker team.